Well, first of all, Bob Woodward, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Whether it's President Trump or previous presidents, is there a kind of presidential power that is imposed on journalists that maybe affects the way they report?
Well, yes, I think to a certain extent, but you want to be respectful. At least that's my approach. But I also think you can't hold back and not ask the tough questions. In the 19 interviews I did with President Trump for this book, I did not hesitate to ask. He would bring up all the old investigations of him, the impeachment, the Mueller investigation, and just be on fire about it. And finally, at one point, I told him, I said, your angst and distress about those investigations, which are over, are keeping you from focusing your energy on dealing with the coronavirus. He didn't agree or disagree, but I was not hesitant to say that because I think that's really true.
Was that you simply putting a proposition to the president when you're suggesting these things to him? Where's the journalistic line there, I guess I'm asking?
Well, after you do hours and hours of interviews, he's not a person who observes lines himself. So I think like 6 months ago in April, I went through 12 specific things that needed to be done, not my recommendation, but the recommendations of doctors and people who were experts on this, including you need to totally mobilize the country. You need to have a kind of a Manhattan Project, which refers to what President Roosevelt did before World War II in building the first atomic bomb. And he really didn't do it. He didn't listen, but I was simply reporting. Now, my wife, who listened to that conversation, after it was over, said to me, "You're shouting at him, and it sounds like you are telling him what to do." And I said, "Well, I'm not telling him what to do. I'm reporting what experts say need to be done, and I'm asking if he's going to do those things." And my wife Elsa was thought I had crossed the line. And I said, I didn't think I did. I could understand lots of people would. But I said, this is a different time. And this is a crisis. And there's no way even a reporter can hold back. I'm not making recommendations. I'm simply conveying what people have said. But she's right. But if you deal with Trump, you've got to shout. If you don't shout and interrupt, you're going to listen to long speeches.
That must have been very tempting, Bob, to try and really, with that access that you had, those many hours, to be offering advice, because the president's turning on Tucker Carlson tonight and listening to his advice, and that's maybe having as big an impact as Anthony Fauci.
Well, maybe that's possible. This is Fox News. It is something he tunes into frequently. But I think on the virus, and we played some of these tapes of my interviews with him. And very early on, from my reporting, I established that, think of this now. This was only 10 months ago. The end of January this year, his national security people went to him and said, "Mr. President, this virus is going to be the biggest national security threat to your presidency." And they laid out chapter and verse that the virus in China was going to come to the United States. It was spread through the air. It was worse than flu. And of course, 7 or 8 days later, when I interviewed him, now I didn't know what had happened on January 28th. It took me until May of this year to figure that out from reporting. But in February, he told me all of this, and I thought he was just talking about China, because China was locked down. If you recall, they in China locked down 768 million people, half their population. Can you imagine doing that? So that was the focus.
That's interesting, Bob, because when your book came out in September, as well as generating a lot of news, there was also a lot of criticism. People saying, hey, why did Woodward sit on this for so long? He saw this disconnect between what Trump was being told, and he was admitting that he was trying not to panic the American public. Have you had second thoughts about that, or are you comfortable with that decision that you decided to keep this in May?
But see, it was a non-decision, because when he told me that in February, all the talk was about China. I thought he was talking about China. And as you know, as a reporter, I can't ask or respond to something I don't know. And I only learned in May what had happened in January that was the seed of his knowledge about how serious the virus was. And by May, everyone knew it was airborne, knew that it was a pandemic, knew it could be spread by people who didn't show symptoms. This is the luxury of doing a book, that you don't have to report things. But I could have not reported anything because I'd like to say I figured it out. I did not figure it out until May. But that's the crucial event. When the histories of this are written about what happened in the United States, it's going to begin on January 28th, when it was laid out to him in a very authoritative way by one of his deputies, who actually had been a reporter in China during the SARS epidemic in 2003, and he knew that the Chinese lied and covered up.
I would imagine, Bob, you're sick of parallels to Watergate, but I'm wondering, is that late January briefing to the president, is that the equivalent to the smoking gun tape? What the president knew when, he knew it in January?
No, actually what it's equivalent to is the Watergate burglary, because that's when you start the movie. And yes, the smoking gun tape came out 4 days, occurred in secret in the White House 4 days after the Watergate burglary. We didn't find out about that until August of 1974. It was over 2 years to get to the bottom of that.
Let's talk a bit about the history as it will be written, do you think, in your mind? Whether it's his Washington Post obituary someday, or how history is going to recall Donald Trump as president.
Well, one of the things I asked him in early interview is, what's the job of the president of the United States? It sounds like a simple question. And he said right off the bat, to protect the people. And I think in his obituary, it's going to say, the late President Donald Trump failed in his responsibility to protect the people of the United States from the coronavirus. He failed to tell the truth. And quite frankly, I think historians are going to be quoted saying that there was a moral failure to understand his responsibility, not just to his political base and Republicans, but everyone in the country. I think it will be a severe judgment.
I wonder, Bob, what have you made of President Trump's behaviour on the campaign trail in the month between his own COVID diagnosis and hospitalisation, and then, as soon as he possibly could, getting back out there to these mass rallies in swing states, fighting hard to try and win this election? What's been revealed of him?
Well, it reveals a determination to be reelected. There's no question about that. I talked to him about this before, well before he got the virus, and he told me, he said he thought in 2016, in his first run for the presidency, that he won barely by a squeaker, but he won. Said he thought he won it in the last week. And in the last week in 2016, he did 24 of these rallies. He gets energy from this. He does draw massive crowds. It shows a lot of support. I think the Trump voter is committed, and there's very private polling showing that these voters who support him would crawl through glass to get to the polls to vote or to mail in their ballot. Biden supporters don't have that kind of depth of personal commitment.
Bob, when all these votes are finally counted, and if it's shown that Donald Trump has in fact lost this election, how do you expect him to respond in the days and weeks and even a couple of months ahead? Easier
to describe the creation of the universe, to be honest with you. I have no idea what's going to happen. How, he said in a very brazen way, well, he's not sure he will accept the conclusion of this. He's not sure there will be a peaceful transfer of power if he loses. I genuinely think we could have chaos. Whether he wins or loses, under the American Constitution, he's going to be in office for all of November, all of December, and most of January. That's a long time to be president and to work this out. So I think a serious social convulsion will follow at some point all of this. And our political system here is going to be tested to see if they can deal with it, whether it's Trump reelected or Biden, the new president. If it is, Bob, that we're seeing Joe Biden raising his hand next January 20th and Donald Trump's going off into private life, do you expect him to stay on the political scene? Could he do a Grover Cleveland and come back in 4 years, or will he just go and play golf and enjoy his money? Well, I don't think he would come back after 4 years of Biden. But again, back in 2016, people thought he couldn't win. As you know, there was all this polling. Well, as the polling experts have said in this country, polling is broken. You don't really know what you're measuring. I think people in this country are wearing a seatbelt, and they're also wearing over-the-shoulder harness, and I think they're wearing a crash helmet. Last week, we discovered the author of that anonymous op-ed that was published famously in the New York Times and the subsequent book being Miles Taylor, a former chief of staff to the Department of Homeland Security. What are your thoughts on that? Should he have been granted anonymity to write that op-ed and write that book, or is that somebody who really should have been prepared to put their name to their claims? Well, it was right after my book, Fear, in 2018, which is my first book on Trump, came out, and it had very specific examples of people defying Trump, taking papers off of his desk, resisting him. And I was told by somebody at the New York Times, because several days later they released that op-ed column, that they were kind of sitting on it, they weren't sure, and that they felt this kind of gave them license to publish it without any specifics. You didn't know what department, you didn't know what the White House, you didn't know anything. And I never thought much of that op-ed piece or the book. In fact, I thought zero about it because I didn't know who it was. I didn't know who was talking. I use unnamed sources, but all my incidents are described with specific people at specific times and exactly what was said and what happened. So I think that's not, as I say, I think zero of it. Do you think, Bob, that reporters have become any more sceptical or towards the president, given the 25,000 false or misleading claims that the fact checkers have identified? Or is the trade of journalism essentially the same, whether it's President Trump, President Obama, President Bush? I think more impact on journalism has been the internet, the culture of impatience and speed. Give it to me now. Give me one word. Give me one sentence. And of course, I'm swimming against all of that. I want to spend time. I want to go back. I want to write books, the long form story of what happened. I think by and large, the reporters for my newspaper, the Washington Post, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, do a spectacular job, but they have to do it every day. And I can say, okay, I've got this, or I could interview Trump on a Wednesday and think about it, talk to some people in the White House, somebody in the CIA, somebody in the Pentagon, and then kind of map out my questions. And he gave me a number where I could call, and he'd answer right away, or it was through an intermediary, or he would call me back. So, that's an extraordinary opportunity for a reporter. And because I have done this almost for 50 years, studied the presidency, written about 9 presidents, that's a lot. And so I've thought about the presidency, what the office is, how it works. As I was saying earlier, the extraordinary power they have. Trump has exercised that. Has he exercised that wisely? Has he addressed the key problems of the coronavirus? I think on the list of things that are important, that's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. The next problem, and it's coupled with this, is the economy, and then next, race relations in this country, which I don't think he really understands. And I asked him about that, and he mocked me for worrying about the Black people in this country and their anger and pain.
We appreciate you and your work, including your latest book, Rage. A pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.